Welcome back. This is the lecture or talk for preparing for the final exam. So if you're watching this video now, you may be in the situation of beginning to actually write your final exam. But I've stressed throughout this course from the very beginning that the final exam is conceived of as a semester-long project. So it certainly could be a good idea to have listened to this lecture right at the beginning of the course or this talk. But in any case, if you had done that, I hope before you actually are ready to submit your final exam or your final essay, that you will be watching this again. Now, the guide to writing the final essay is really important, I think. And I don't think that I'll be giving any more information here in this talk than is there in the guide. The point is how to approach the question and the problem. And just one footnote, so to speak. When I say final essay or final exam, those are actually the same in my mind in terms of the function of the course and how this assignment, the final essay, functions. It functions as a final exam because it is designed for you to demonstrate your understanding of all the course material. There have been 4 exams, and each of the exams has been designed to help you prepare for the final. Now, and the quizzes are there just for the information, so to speak. There's no separate study guide for the final, aside from the guide to writing the final. Therein I address, too, how the list of terms to know for the final is essentially the 4 list of terms to know for the 4 exams. This is a daunting assignment. I'm aware of that. That's why I also say it should be a semester-long project. And if it has been, that is great. If it hasn't, take a deep breath and try to put it all together now, because that is what you're being asked to do. The question gets at this core issue of how can we understand human beings? How can we understand the commonality of human beings, if there is something common, in light of the vast diversity of cultures and structures and ideals and beliefs that we've seen throughout this course? Is it simply geographical difference? Is that what makes the difference between human cultures? Or is there something in addition to that? But with all the diversity, is there something that unifies human beings as human beings? I think I talked about the adaptability in the question itself, the adaptability of human beings as well as into something common. And what that is getting at is the unity and diversity. Is there a commonality that makes us human beings, regardless of our culture, our society, our political views, our religious views, our beliefs, our concepts, and on we go? If there is, then how do we explain and understand the diversity? Now, adaptability is already giving you an indication of the direction, I think, in any case, that diversity can be explained in one sense, is that humans, I think, over the time have shown an amazing innate ability to adapt to new situations. And those adaptations are part of what led to diversity. From the need of Homo sapiens to spread from Africa throughout the globe in a relatively short period of time, and to develop different cultures, different civilizations, knowing the distinction between culture and civilization, I hope. How do we put that all together, and how does that really function and work? And behind that, too, is what drives history. Is it economic need? The original migration of Homo sapiens, was that based on economic, biological need in terms of food supplies and things? Or was there something else involved in that? Now, this is a question, too, that you can't answer, that cannot be answered based on the extant evidence, whether that be in terms of the exam, the course material or all the evidence that is out there does not allow historians to make that determination in terms of why did Homo sapiens spread. We can theorize, we can point to different factors, but how we argue our case is more important than saying that there was one reason that led to it all. You could argue that it was based on economic need, economic biological need for food supplies, settlements, etc. You could argue that it was based on warfare, which then goes back to, in some ways, to economics, and that if there was a small group with a supply, plenty of supply of food, and another group that did not have the food and the supplies, they would try to take it. And that I talked about as being part of the origins of civilization, the issues of building a wall and living in cities. Now, civilization, as such, is a particular form of human culture that arose approximately 4000 BCE. I think the textbook says 3200 or 3500 BCE. There's debates about that. And cannot be associated or equated with human culture as such. So there's human cultures within civilizations. And there are a variety of different civilizations, from China to India to Africa to the Mesoamerica and to Europe and Asia, the whole bit. There's different forms of civilization. And with that came different forms of belief. Now, in terms of what drives history, that is one of the things that the lectures has stressed or put forward or suggested, that it's actually belief. Whether that be religious belief or belief in the need to immigrate, the need to find new ways of living, the need to innovate, the need to say we can do this better. Because if you don't believe that it is possible to do something better, you're not going to try. So belief is far broader than religious belief or theological belief or political belief. Is belief the driving factor of history, which then relates it to ideas, intellectual history, not in the sense of philosophy and theology as such, but as I use the term, going back to the Latin, intellectus, in Latin, intellectus simply means understanding. How do we understand the world? And how did human beings in the past understand their world? How did they put it all together? And we can't begin to put it all together ourselves, historically, without trying, to the extent possible, to understand how human beings have previously tried to come to an understanding of their world and the world in which they found themselves. And what did they make of it? What was the meaning they saw and found in their world? Now, economics is fundamental, I would argue. But before economics or underneath economics is belief. You say, well, yes, but what about hunger? What about the basic biological drives? Those are essential too and cannot be factored out. So you could say that there's an innate need for reproduction, for food, for shelter, for water, etc. And that is what still drives history. How many of the wars that have been fought and are still being fought, when it comes down to it, are about the basic needs of human beings and how to get more of them for your own group, your own country, state, whatever. You can make a valid argument that way. But without the belief, would those basic biological needs and drives and instincts be put into effect? That was kind of the question. And again, you are not required to adhere to my argument that belief is primary at all. But I think as an historical factor, you cannot discount it as a factor. That gets at a point in terms of your final that is essential, in my view. And this is essential for your grade. The basis of my grading your final is not what position you take. It is how you argue it, how you use the course material, namely the textbook and the lectures, for making your case. While this question, in all its breadth and monstrosity, may be It may seem like I'm asking for your opinion because I'm also asking you to reflect on things. I'm not going to grade opinions. I've said that before, I believe, I hope, because your opinions are your opinions. What I can grade is how well you use the course material to defend your argument. So I would also strongly recommend reviewing the document historical argument as part of your preparation for the final essay. Because there's a difference between an argument and an opinion. And we so often today have lost sight of that distinction completely, and we equate argument with arguing. Opinions, we can argue about opinions. That could be fun. It could be very vicious and almost could be violent. But arguing is not the same as constructing an argument based on evidence. And that doesn't mean that an analysis of all the evidence will yield a conclusive, definitive, proved conclusion. Scholars debate constantly on how to interpret the evidence. What does the evidence mean? How are we to understand it? But the foundation of that is the evidence itself, and then arguments constructed on that basis. You say, isn't interpretation simply opinion? Well, yes and no, because interpretation, there are, let's say, rules of interpretation. And following the same rules can also lead to differing interpretations. It's a fine line and a fine distinction to make. I'm not going to grade your interpretation, but I am going to grade how you support and defend and present your interpretation, which is based on your analysis of the evidence, which in this case is the course material, the textbook, and the lectures. That is important. Also important is that you address all aspects of the question. You say, well, that's just impossible. It's too much. And also you say it's supposed to be 7 to 10 pages. Well, I also state in the guide to writing the final exam, it's a minimum of 7 to 10 pages, and that is intended to be almost a theoretical statement that I cannot really conceive of someone being able to write an A paper writing only 5 or 6 pages, just because of this expanse of the material. That does not mean if you write 10 pages, you're going to get an A. It does not mean if you write 10 pages, it's going to be sufficient to cover all what the question is asking. There is no maximum, so don't worry about that. Now, that is also not to say that, oh my gosh, I have to write 60 pages. And I think in the guide to writing the final exam, I say, 60 pages may be the upper limit, even though I would happily read 100 if it's all pertinent to the question and your answer. The point is, it's open. Do not worry about length in terms of, oh, this is too much, I have to cut back. Don't cut back. There's a time factor involved, certainly, so you're limited by the time factor. You're limited by the course material, but you're not limited by a maximum length. It's a good exercise to learn how to say something very concisely in as few words as possible. But that's not what I'm getting at here. That's not the lesson I'm trying to teach you. What I want to teach you is how to really comprehensively deal with an argument, and an extended argument that is complex, and presenting sufficient evidence to support it. Which also means if there is contrary evidence that does not support your position, you need to address that. You can't just ignore it. You just can't pretend that it doesn't exist and it's not there. So you can't say simply the basic driving force of history, which accounts for the adaptability and the diversity that we see in the development of world history, was economics. You have to say, okay, that's fine, you can argue that. But then what about belief, which is what I've kind of presented implicitly and sometimes explicitly in the lectures. You can't just ignore belief. You'd have to address it. Say, okay, well, belief too is important, and this is how the lectures have presented it. However, when we really analyze it, and here are the reasons why, because we see in ancient China, in ancient India, in ancient Europe, this basic economic need. We see this what Roberts has called the age of European hegemony. Eurocentric, yes, as I've already addressed. as being essentially based on trade, economics, development, as still that fundamental economic motive, providing basic needs. Because needs and wants, and when do needs transform into wants, and how do we make that decision is still a question that we have not answered. Human beings need water, food, shelter. To survive as a species, we need to procreate. How we do all those things is different. And then the question is, what is the basis of want? And what is the basis of need? Is it simply biological need to survive? Or is it how to survive? The Renaissance humanists, and I haven't really talked much about the Renaissance. I did in one of the lectures. If you've read that lecture, which I hope you have, you know that I'm not a big fan of the Renaissance. I should clarify there. What I mean by that is I'm not really a fan of Renaissance scholars and how they treat it and approach it. But one distinction they made, Renaissance people at the time, Renaissance humanists, made was a distinction between just living, or vivere in Latin. Vivo, vivere is a Latin verb to live, and then living well, bene vivere. And the point was not simply just to live. The point was to live well, bene vivere. How is that defined in the various cultures and societies that we have looked at over the course of this term? And how do we account for those understandings, those ideals, those beliefs, for what constituted living well, as distinct from simply living? And which is the primary factor motivating historical change, historical development, and how do we understand it and approach it? And with these questions, we get back to the very first part of the course with the lectures, in terms of the theory of history. And what is history anyway? How do we approach it? How do we understand it? And how is our understanding and theory of history, implicitly or explicitly, how does it affect our understanding of what happened and the historical development? That is an issue of reflection too. And again, there is no absolute right answer on that. There's no right theory. It's not an issue of right theory or wrong theory. It's adequate theory. It is acceptable theory. It is or good theory, or it is bad theory, or it is not applying the theory correctly, or it is applying it incorrectly. We don't impose a theory on the sources. We use theory to help us understand the evidence, to squeeze as much out of it as possible, because there's so little comparatively. It all gets back to, again, the title of this course is Perspectives on World History, from the beginnings to approximately 1800. The question is asking, what are your perspectives after having taken this course? After thinking about and being presented with what you've been presented with in terms of the theory and nature of history, how it all works, so to speak, and with the actual material based on what we can understand to this point, the interpretations that have been presented in the textbook and in the lectures, neither of which are truth. Roberts has offered his perspective, just as I've offered some of my perspectives in my lectures. And how do those all fit together? And how then do you put it all together in your own grand narrative, which goes back to what I talk about in some of the earlier lectures. How do you construct that, and on what basis? What is the reasons? How has this course changed your understanding of how history works, of how the world has got to where it was on the cusp of the emergence of modernity, which is really then part of how has the world gotten to be where we are today? Now, obviously, there's a big gap. The 19th and 20th and 21st centuries are not part of this course. And so there's a gap between where this course ends, 108, approximately around 1800, and then where we are today. And yet this part of the course too should help us understand and reflect on how do we get to the situation where we are today. Can we understand our world today on a global perspective, whatever you might think of that? I'm not here talking about the global village or globalization and the positives and negatives of what those terms signify, but simply in our context of our global world today, how have we come to this situation? And I would argue we cannot understand that if we do not understand something about this earlier development from the origins to approximately 1800 with then H109. The second part of this course fills in with the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries. That is what this is getting at. Every answer to this question is preliminary. There's no final answer because it's a question that should always be with us. It's like the meaning of life. There's no absolute, definitive, universal, once and for all answer to the question, the meaning of life. But it is a question that we must continually ask ourselves, both in terms of for our individual selves, but also in terms of what it's all about for the world in which we find ourselves, or at least if in our societies, our communities, our nations, our states, and then the world. What is it all about? That's what this is getting at, and it all has to be based on the evidence. That which for which there is no evidence cannot factor into the answer historically. You could say that. I believe in Marduk, let's say. Marduk is the Lord of all, and Marduk is guiding history. That's what it's all about. We can't say that. We can say that Hammurabi sort of viewed it that way. The ancient Mesopotamians saw and believed that, but we can't argue ourselves that historically. We can't argue that religious beliefs are the meaning of life, whatever they might be, but we cannot, as historians, determine which religious beliefs are correct and which are wrong. Or we can say, here I would say, this is a footnote, atheism too is a religious belief, but that gets into other issues. It's a belief that still is based on a leap of faith in human reason, etc. But that's a whole other argument. Actually, I made it in another book, but that's another issue. But here the question is, how can we defend the evidence? Again, it's very much a legal argument. How can we present the evidence to the judge that our case is worthy of winning, so to speak, or being deemed a good, valid, excellent case, better than our opponents? Now, the issue with the grading of your exam stops there, because I will happily give a top grade to whichever position you take. So this is not a competition of just winning over someone else. The competition that you have is with your own understanding of the course material. How well do I understand it, and how well can I demonstrate my understanding of it? It would therefore be probably helpful if in your essay you cite the lectures and you cite the textbook. That is a clear way of showing this is where I'm getting my positions from, or this is the positions that I'm arguing against for these reasons, also based on the course material. Now, that in a nutshell, so to speak, now that I've been going on for over 20 minutes, is what I hope you will see in this final essay is an opportunity for you. An opportunity for you to come to an understanding, your own understanding based on the course material of how it all works, at least for now, which is still a preliminary understanding at this time. That's what this is all about. And again, it's not about the position you take, it's about how well you defend it based on the course material. If you have any questions, just ask. I'm looking forward to reading your final essays. These are always exciting for me to see how students do put it all together and what they have gotten out of the course. Because in some ways, this question is simply, so what did you learn? In many ways, that's what it comes down to it. What did you get out of this course and what did you learn? But it gives you the structure to do so with the problem given to you in terms of putting it all together, in terms of the course material with the 4 different sections. The textbook and the lectures, and the question of commonality and adaptability, or unity and diversity. is really what it's about. Have fun with it if you can. I know you may be saying that's a perverse thing to say right now to us as we're getting ready to submit our final essay. But I hope it can be fun, or at least when you look back on it, it will be fun. Again, if you have any questions, just ask. All work, if you haven't already turned in essay exams 1 through 4, you need to do so by the end of the course, the same day that the final is due. But I hope you've been working on this all along. That was the intent, and that was the instruction. So this really can serve as this culmination, the capstone of this course. I've enjoyed this course. Thank you for your patience, your interest, your questions, your comments. And maybe I'll see you again in other courses, also perhaps in-person courses. But whatever it is, I hope that you will leave this course after you submit your final essay and everything with a feeling of, I really got something out of that course that has changed how I understand things. That's the whole point. So thank you, and good luck, and have a good break over the holidays. And I will see you again, I hope. Take care. Bye-bye.